I love junk radios, and this one I think probably qualifies. This is an Airline Montgomery Ward Model 93BR. It's got a great big chunk out of the top and a great big crack in the top. The chassis is complete. Kind of a neat little radio, 4 tubes. It's got a, let's see, 12 SA7, SK7, SQ7, and a 70L7. And it's permeability tuned. There's a coil, I think, for the antenna. And then there's one on the bottom right there for the oscillator. It is complete, even got the original back on it. It's a metal back. Little antenna, external antenna connector, which I imagine you're going to need if you're going to pick up much on it. Where I'm at, I'm in a rural area, and I don't get hardly any AM station strong enough to do anything. But I'm going to fix this thing. I can fix this top. I've done a mini one, replacing big old chunks. I've already sanded it down. See, I've got the little, excuse me here just a minute. Let me find the dial for it. I don't know what I did with it, but anyway, I've got the little plastic dial that goes in here. It's a tiny little radio. You can see my hand here. And the fellow that had this, in fact, I bought it at a ham fest, sitting on the table. I bought the thing for $5. I said, that's a real challenge, the kind I like. Here's some pictures of it. He had done some research on it. Here's a Christmas ad from 1939. And it was, if you get the regular brown case, it was $5.75. They had 4 other colors. If you got the other colors, it was $6.55. So, neat little radio. I'm gonna fix her up. I think I'll paint it red. That was one of the colors that it came in. So I'll keep you posted as I work on this. One other note, this is an AC/DC set, but I've measured it. It doesn't seem to, the chassis doesn't seem to be connected to either side of the line, so it looks like it's got an isolated chassis, even though I don't see an isolation capacitor on the schematic. And I doubt it would have a hot chassis because it's got this metal back on it, and it's got a UL label on it. Even in 1939, I don't think they would have allowed that metal back on it if it had a hot chassis. So we'll see once we get it going. Okay, I got me some JB Weld mixed up here, and I'm going to, as the first step here, I'm going to raise this up and force some JB Weld in its cracks. Okay. Give me a paper towel here and wipe off some of the excess. Okay. I'll let that dry a day or two. And I'll start working on filling in this big hole here on the top. So I'm preparing this little cabinet for repair. What I did was I took my sandblaster and I lightly brushed the inside of this because there was a lot of dirt and grime up in there. I also lightly brushed around these edges where I'm going to put my patch. And I've got a piece of, this is regular flashing, aluminum flashing, and I'm going to make me a patch to go right in there. And I'll use JB Weld to hold it in. That way. Put JB Weld on it to hold it in, and then after that's set up good, I'll fill it. And I also sandblasted this piece of aluminum flashing to make a good surface for the JB Weld to stick to. There we go. Got the patch all JB Weld. Got a clamp on it there to hold it all in place until it dries. And it's going to work out beautiful. And then when that's all dry, I'll sandblast it just a little bit, just to roughen up the JB Weld. And I'll fill it with regular body filler. And sand it down and paint it. I'm doing this radio in reverse. I finished the cabinet before I restored the radio itself, but it turned out kind of pretty. It pretty little dial. And so now I'm going to get started on the electronics. Okay, we're ready to get going here. We'll get the bottom of this thing first. We're going to have to replace all these old paper caps. And the electrolytic, yeah, there it is, that brown package there. Have to replace that. I'll recap it. Yeah, this one's going to be a tight one, not a lot of room in there. Fortunately, these replacement capacitors are much smaller. So let's get started. They packed a whole lot of stuff into this little radio, and they didn't make it to be worked on. This large, this is a 0.15 at 400 that was housed way down inside of here. And I got to get it out of the way before I can work on this electrolytic here. But I think what it'll also do, if I put one of these new modern 0.15s in there, I think that'll free up enough room. I can mount me a terminal strip in here to mount electrolytics on it to replace these. Because right now there's not much room. One is it's a 40 at 150 and a 20 at 150. And I don't really have any 150 volt electrolytics, so I'm having to use 450, but I think I can get them in this area right here. So we're going to give it a try. The things you run into. This radio has got mostly cloth covered wire and it's in good shape. But coming out of this is the IF transformer. And the wires coming out of it, see that brown and green and blue, and there's another one there. This LED light's gonna put the bars in it, but anyway, that wire is like plastic coated and it's deteriorated and crumbled. That brown wire ran over to another place in the radio, and when messing with this radio, pushing things aside, the insulation started crumbling off of it. So I said, well, I'll have to replace that wire. And then I had to lift these trim capacitors here up to get to the nuts that hold the IF on. And I realized all the wires coming out of that little IF transformer are that same stuff. So I'm going to have to get this thing out of here and open up that can and replace everything, all the wires, because they're going to just touch them and they crumble. Got it out of there. You can see those, I guess that's rubber covered, it's deteriorated, those wires. One of them, that brown one to the left, is cloth covered, but the other three are rubber covered. You can see where I marked it with a paint pen so I can put it back in the same position it was in. Because the cloth wire came out through a separate hole on the chassis. And if I don't get it back in there like it was, I'll probably have problems. So now I'm going to pull this transformer out of there and replace these wires. It's out of there. You can see this wire. If I can get that green wire focused there, you can see how that insulation is crumbling. And you can also see in removing it, it snagged one of those little fine wires on that transformer, snagged, I guess, the side and pulled it loose. So got to repair that. So now I'll go to work on it. Got that IF can back in there, and all the new wires run. You can see the blue and the green there running to the SA7. Lo and behold, this other IF transformer is identical. You can see the blue and brown wire there. There, that rubber that's crumbling off. But even more serious, on this SK7, the IF transformer is connected between pins 8 and 6. And I've got no continuity between 8 and 6, which may mean that that transformer is burned out, or that little fine wires come loose, or whatever. But since I am able to make that transformer work, I'm still going to need to replace all these crumbly wires. So just well start clipping the wires and take this transformer out. You haven't lived until you've worked on one of these little radios where they have crammed a whole lot of stuff in. Down south we call that a blivet. In case you don't know what a blivet is 10 pounds of you-know-what in a 5-pound bag. So this is a blivet. If that's not enough, Turns out that the on-off switch is bad. This is an interesting switch. It's got 3 terminals on it. Looks like the third one is not connected to anything. It's just a binding post, used as a binding post on the back of that. And that sort of confirms it, because here's a little diagram I made of everything that's hooked to that switch. You can see there on the right hand circle on the right hand side is the switch. Look at that top terminal. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 items connected to it. The switch side has got 3, and then where the AZ comes in and goes to one of the terminals. So, like I say, that third terminal looks like it was just a binding post. Another problem, this volume control switch that came out of here has got that little split shaft push on knob. This Chinese equivalent, this is a 500K with a switch. It's what I need to replace it, of course, is a solid shaft. Now, I've had a lot of good luck with cutting this off and JB welding it to this shaft, but this one is so short I don't have a lot of metal to deal with. So I went to my knob box, and I've got about 100 of these little knobs like this. They're very small, and they've got a set screw. And so I think I'll cut this shaft same length as this one and use one of these knobs with a set screw. I'll need to paint them white to go against this red radio, but I think that'll be okay. That new Krylon paint that I don't like, they advertise it as specially made to stick to plastic, so I'll try some white on these and see how it turns out. Probably rough them up a little with the bead blaster to make sure the paint sticks good. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to try to cut this off and JB weld it on this one. I'm going to use some knobs with set screws. Got that new pot in there. I wired it up with as many capacitors and wires as I possibly can before I put it in there, because it's absolutely no room to work. So I got those with flying leads, and I will route them to the proper places. All these old dog bone resistors and these capacitors I'm going to replace anyway, so I've got all the resistors wired on now, the new resistors and the new capacitors. So now I gotta connect all the pigtails to the proper places. No room in this thing. It's all wired up. I recapped it. I think I only left one resistor. There's a 30 ohm 3 watt right here, big old dog bone type resistor, and the resistance was dead on, so I left it. I think every other resistor I replaced. I don't think I left any of them, and all the capacitors except for the micas. One smart thing I did, I mounted all the components that are connected to this switch / potentiometer before I put it in, and that allowed me to splice onto some of the leads going to these, because working around inside of here, there's no room to work. Some of these pins you can't get to. So that worked out good. Just to recap, this thing was a lot of work. First of all, the wire going to the IF transformers was all rubber coated and had dried up, and when you touched them, the insulation came off, so I had to pull both of the IF transformers and put new wire in them. And then I ran into some problems with the close quarters here. Had to do some things to work around those issues. And after I got it all recapped and ready to go, I tested the tubes. I guess I should have done that first. And the 70L7 rectifier tube, or actually output tube, audio output tube, was bad. So of all the thousands of tubes I've got, I don't think I've ever gone down and looked for a tube in my warehouse that I didn't have. But I didn't have a 70L7, so I've had to order one of those, and I have to wait till it gets here. But it's ready to plug in and turn on and see if it works. The other thing I forgot to mention is that the potentiometer / switch was bad, so I had to replace that and cut the shaft off. And so, as I explained, I'll end up with one split shaft, one solid, but I think I can make that work. There's a pile of caps and little dog bone resistors I replaced. And it's all done. Turned out to be a pretty little radio. It's about the middle of the day here, and I'm not going to pick up much on AM this time of day in this area. I'll have to wait tonight, and I'll try to make a little video of it actually playing.